everyone, I'm Emily Teague. I'm a fashion and portrait photographer based out of Brooklyn, New York, but I'm currently working for a couple months in Cape Town in South Africa. And for today, I figured a fun way to incorporate locations into my video would be to do a fashion shoot where I lean into a vintage aesthetic on a budget. Earlier this week, I was out to dinner with my best friend, Brandy Nicole, and our waitress was absolutely charming and gorgeous, so I asked her to model for me, and now here is our model for today, Laura. There's a few ways I'm going to try and achieve this vintage style. First off, of course, styling. I have to throw out the disclaimer that I am not a stylist in any means. I love making the selection from clothes of what a stylist brings, but sourcing the clothes, seeing what works together in store isn't always my strongest suit. So while going through thrift stores for this shoot, I tried my best to just ignore all of that and really lean into just playing with styles from the 1960s, 70s, and 90s. Along with styling choices for this vintage look, I'm also going to be using this little wig cap. I'm gonna rubber band this around my lens, which is going to give my images a soft, warm, and hazy effect. I'm also choosing locations that are pretty neutral in color and could work well with each of the styles I've chosen. And finally, at the end of all of this, I'm going to jump into editing in Capture One and polish up these looks. So let's get started. So we're here on location with Laura, our model, and we're gonna start shooting in this apartment complex that has this kind of funky architecture, these kind of desaturated, neutral colors. It's a lot of like creams and blues that should lend itself pretty well to our what we're trying to do with this 70s aesthetic. And then talking about 70s aesthetic for styling, this is our look for today. And this is a collaboration between Laura bringing stuff and me finding stuff at the thrift store. So I found this men's top that we ended up just tying at the waist. And then Laura brought these great flared pants, just paired with sandals. And then for makeup, my makeup artist Jess was really insistent that if we're doing 70s and if we're leaning into more neutral colors, we needed to go bold with a blue eye. And I got very scared, as I do when I think about bold colors for makeup. But she did it in such a subtle way that I think it lends itself to the 70s without being overboard. So really happy with the look. And then finally, I just wanted her to have a prop, especially because this is Laura's first time modeling. It helps to have something for a model to kind of play with or just have in their hands. So Laura has this book from 1967. We almost got into the 70s. This was another thrift store find yesterday. So let's try taking a test shot. And right now we're just in complete shade, but we have a lot of harsh light coming in from over here. It's about noon, so the sun is right above us with some really harsh highlights, really dark shadows. So I'm kind of just hiding in here, but what I do like about this diffused look is we still have a lot of light coming right here onto Laura's face. So this side is pretty shadowed. This side, there's some highlights coming in, but it's still looking very diffused and soft. So let's get a test shot. Right now I'm at 1/125th for my shutter. I'm at 2.8 for my aperture and 250 for my ISO. So because we're in the shadowed area, I had to lower my shutter speed more than I normally would. I try to keep it within about 1/160th, but I went down to 1/125th, which I still feel pretty safe with. I say this a lot, but I have shaky hands, and so I always try to be around 1/160th, but 1/125th, totally fine. So that's letting in a little more light. I also took my aperture and lowered it down a lot, so I opened it up to 2.8. And then, and I didn't want to lower it anymore just because I don't want her shoulder to get out of focus. I still like having her completely in focus, but just giving some softness to the area around her. And then for my ISO, I'm at 250. I raised it more than I normally do. Normally keep it at 100, but raising it to 250 is not gonna degrade the quality, so I'm all happy with that. So all the colors in here are working really well together. I'm super happy with this. These are just really beautiful portraits. Laura is killing it for her first time. And I just am really happy with our lighting. And I think having this little wig cap on it is giving us a lot of warmth. It's diffusing it. It's making everything really, really soft and kind of giving this vintage feel. So I like shooting through stuff a lot. It just kind of dirties the foreground and makes it more interesting to me. I always have different stuff that I'm sourcing. So today I only have this little perfume bottle, but I'm really happy with how it's looking. Whether I have it on the left side or the right side, I'm turning in different ways just to see how I can play with it. So when I have it on the left side, it's a lot lighter. When I have it on the right side, I'm kind of leaning into that warmth that it's creating just in the bottom right-hand corner. But I think this is feeling successful, so let's move to another location. For our second look, I saw this little strip of sun that is fading very quickly, and so I thought it'd be kind of cool if Laura has her book maybe she's like walking down the hallway and is just walking through this little strip of light for more of a dramatic look. So Laura, I'll have you go just to where the light begins. And I'm just gonna have you come towards me and trying to keep as much of your face in the light as possible. That looks great. Okay, let's see how that's looking. And right now, my settings, I'm at 1/500th of a second for my shutter. I'm at 4.0 for my aperture, and my ISO is at 100. So Laura, start walking towards me, kind of slow. Beautiful, perfect. A little faster, and then come just a little bit over to the light. Yep, right there, perfect. So the look that we were just capturing was a very dramatic look, and there was this beautiful light streak, and we were like, okay, we have to try this out and see how it goes. And then of course, as light does, we lost our light streak. And so Laura spotted another one down here, we raced down here, and I actually decided I wanted to change it up from this dark dramatic look that we had before. So I was at 1/500th and 4.0 for my settings back there with ISO 100. And here I decided I wanted to kind of bring in some of this environment more because we have more to play with here. And I'm actually happy with how the look is looking. So I'm now at 1/250th. I've lowered my aperture to 2.0 because I want to let a lot of that light in. And I'm keeping my ISO at 100. And so it's just kind of giving me more of that vintage vibe that I was originally going for, but I'm still happy that we played around with that dramatic look. So let's try another location. So one more shot outside, just because we have direct light and it's pretty harsh, so we might as well play with it. So I've cranked my shutter speed up. I'm now at 1/640th. My aperture is at 4.5, and I've kept my ISO at 100. And we're gonna get some nice reflections off of the metal here, and I'm just kind of leaning into like this hot 70s dream. So let's play around with this. Turn your head just slightly to right there, perfect. And tilt it back just a little bit. Yep, gorgeous. And the thumb out. Yep, perfect. So we've changed our location to this pretty wide open, beautifully lit stairwell. And we've also changed decades. So we were shooting 70s. I feel like we're going more for like 90s skater girl grunge now. So for this look, we have some high top Converse. We have this cute little dress that has like this kind of vintage floral print on it. Laura's got my longboard, and she had these really fantastic glasses that kind of reminded me of the Matrix. So yeah, I feel like 90s skater girl grunge is what we're going for. And my settings, I am at 1/160th, which again is pretty standard for my shutter speed. I've lowered my aperture to 2.2, so I'm trying to let a lot of this light in. And ISO is 400. Let's take a test shot. So something to note, I had my little wig cap on before, but I felt like it was making the shot look a little too muddy just because there's a lot less light in here. And because there's a lot less light, that's one of the reasons why I've taken my aperture down to 2.2. I've also taken my ISO and raised it up to 400. So I'm really just trying to get as much light in this room as possible. We do have a lot of great window light, but because of the time of the day, there's not a lot of direct light coming right in through the windows. Some other stuff that I'm trying to look for is I'm getting this really low angle. Again, I want her to look powerful and awesome, so I'm pretty down low. And then because we have the symmetry of these windows on this side and on this side, I'm kind of just trying to stay right in the middle and I really have everything framed around her. So the focus is entirely on her and she can just look awesome. So really, really happy with these photos. I think we'll play around a little bit more. So for our last look, we're going 1960s, and we're actually finally taking advantage of Cape Town's nature, which is incredible. So we're on Signal Hill, which overlooks all of Cape Town, and there's this kind of nice little hill coming down here. And so what I'm thinking is we've got this nice white kind of creamy dress paired with a belt for our 1960s look, and we also have some flowers. So I'm just gonna have Laura kind of skip down the hill towards me. I'm gonna try to be off to the side, kind of hiding in the grass so I get some dirty foreground. And I'm gonna go back to using my little hazy warm wig cap because I really want that kind of vintage warm haze, especially if we're going like 1960s in a field. And so let's take a few test shots. So it's super, super bright up here. And with Laura skipping and having motion, I had to raise my shutter speed a lot. So I'm now at 1/3200th and my aperture is at 3.2 and I've kept my ISO low at 100. And I'm really thrilled with these shots. Laura's first time modeling, huge success. Thank you, Laura. I'm excited to go home and get these photos into Capture One and see what I can do to get a more vintage effect on them. So here we are in Capture One with an edit of one of my favorite images from this shoot that really feels like summer in the 70s with kind of a cinematic vibe to it. And I really like the way that the wig cap kind of added this warm haze to this image. So oftentimes with my editing, it can take me a really long time to fine tune exactly what I want. I didn't want to make this a 30-minute video for you guys, so here is an edit that I've already done, and then I figured I would go to my unedited photo and kind of walk through the same steps, and it might not look exactly like my first edit just because every time I edit a photo, I edit it slightly differently, but I'm gonna try to get it pretty close. So the only thing that I've done to this image so far is I've cropped it and rotated it slightly, and just to see what my crop was before, this is it. There was a lot in the background that looked a little distracting for me, and also because I'm really leaning into that cinematic vibe, I thought that going for a 16:9 crop would feel more cinematic and also get rid of some of those distracting elements that I was looking at. And I've also rotated really just ever so slightly just because I'm looking at these window lines up here and wanting those to add up. So I'm gonna take my white balance and raise it up just slightly. Right about there is looking good for me, and I just love these colors. I really love a lot of warm neutrals, so this is right up my alley. My tint I'm going to leave alone for now. My exposure I'm going to leave alone for now, and I typically do. Something I almost always do though, and I think it's going to work well for this because it is so hazy and I want there to be a little bit more contrast, is I'm going to take my contrast up, and I'm normally within about 5 to 15. For today we can go to about 10. And then for my brightness, I'm gonna bring it up just ever so slightly, about 3, and I can already tell I'm gonna wanna pull down some of these whites and highlights later, but I'm gonna leave that there for now. My saturation, because this is, again, vintage photo shoot, I'm gonna take some of the color out, which is also something I just normally do for editing because I feel like if I tend to, if I push my saturation too much, it can look a little clownish, so I'm gonna bring this down to about -10, and already I'm liking the differences that I'm seeing in here. For high dynamic range, I'm going to take my highlights, and I'm especially looking at the highlight on her forehead, on her cheek, nose, especially on her shirt, on this pole, and I'm going to bring those down. So let's see, all the way. That's okay. I'm going to bring it back so slightly. About -39 is fine, and I'll go quite a bit with taking my highlights down. I just try not to take them all the way down because sometimes it can look a little over-processed for me, but this is looking good. I'll take my shadows and I'm going to bring those down just a little bit. I'm especially looking at her hair. Again, because we have that wig cap, everything is lightened up a lot. Some of it a little bit too much, so that will help bring some shadows back in. My whites, I'm going to pull down on those as well. Again, I'm looking at those areas around her shirt. You can see if I pull it all the way up, if I pull it all the way down. So let's go near our highlights, and let's say -29 is fine. For our blacks, I'm going to bring it down just so slightly for the same reason that I brought down our shadows. This is looking good, and I'm just going to see what I've done with my high dynamic range and hold Option and click Reset. Looking good. Already I'm a little bit happier. Levels, let's bring those highlights in just a little bit, just to brighten the overall highlights in this image. And then my midtones, I'm going to take those down a bit, again, for the same reason that I was taking down my shadows and blacks, just different tools to really accomplish the contrast that I want to create in here. And then my blacks, I'm going to leave these alone. I feel like oftentimes with the darks, the shadows in an image, when I play with levels, it can be a little bit too much, so sometimes I might stick around 1 or 2, but for this image, because I do want this more hazy vintage effect, I'm just going to leave it alone. Let's go down to clarity. I'm not going to touch that. For my curve, I often play in Luma instead of RGB, just so my color is not affected. And I'm looking at the shadows, and I still want them down just a little bit, so I'll go to the shadow portion of here and bring that down just so slightly. Curves is another one you really want to make these very slight adjustments with because it can go a long way. So that doesn't look like I've done much at all, but if you hold Option and you see what you've done by clicking Reset, you can see that tiny point has really made quite a bit of difference. So next, let's go to our vignetting. I always like to make kind of a more dramatic look, and again, we're going for like 1970s summer cinema. I think that's what we're gonna call this. So let's bring that down a bit, and I'm just watching this image as I do this. I think right about there looks good to me. And then film grain, again, vintage, so let's go to about 20, and I'm just gonna zoom in and see how that looks, and hold my Option key, and it's looking super, super subtle, so maybe I'll go to 30, but I don't wanna push too much on this. If I go all the way up, you can see that looks fake to me, so we don't want that. Maybe about 30 sounds good. Just a subtle little adjustments. And I talk about this all the time when I'm editing. Really, the way that I edit is just a bunch of adjustments all added up together. And so let's look at this final version versus what I have going on now. It looks like I decided to make it a little bit darker. And so I can kind of split the difference if I want. Really, going back and forth between the two of these, I think both of them look great and older. I'll see what adjustments I did on this other one that I didn't do on mine. Let's see, I'm comparing. I was pretty close in numbers, and we'll go up here. So it looks like one of the big adjustments that I did in this final edit, or the original edit I should say, is I took my highlights and I lowered them down quite a bit more. So you can kind of play with this and see what feels good, but really either one of these is making me happy, and yeah, this is how I would kind of approach doing a vintage edit. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts, questions, or anything at all in the comments below. Also, feel free to let me know what else you're interested in or curious about, and I will see you all soon.